Well, last month, we told you about the U.S. military's new strategy to expand education initiatives for non-commissioned military officers. The champion of that plan is Command Chief Master Sergeant Ramón Colón-López, the command senior enlisted leader for U.S. Africa Command, who recently hosted an Africom Senior Enlisted Leaders Conference in Germany. He sat down exclusively with VOA Pentagon Correspondent Carla Babb to talk about what this new plan means for the continent, as well as the U.S. military's role in stopping growing threats from disease to piracy.
The number of U.S. military people in Africa is about half of just the country of Afghanistan.
Yes.
So we're not trying to blow anything out of proportion here, but there does seem to be an increased focus all of a sudden in Africa. Would you agree with that, and why is that?
Well, when you look at the presence, whether it's UN, NATO, us, the United States, the French, the UK, we're really interested in peacekeeping operations rather than contingency operations. And it's not only military actions. We have the current Ebola outbreak in the DRC, to where we're helping those agencies, to the greatest extent possible, to be able to contain the threat, because now you have neighboring countries, Uganda, as an example, that are concerned that the disease is going to go ahead and cross the border. So everything that we do in Africa is a targeted, focused approach in a limited capacity, because we do not have the assets to do everything that we would like to do in the continent.
Since you mentioned the DRC, has the U.S. military been formally asked to come in and help with the Ebola crisis yet?
We have not. We have other agencies like the World Health Organization, that is clearly helping USAID. And remember that those are agencies that work hand in hand with Africa Command. Because I recently made a comment that when I look at Africa Command, it doesn't quite sound like a combatant command. It's more like a collaboration command.
And you're very passionate on training the enlisted forces. Tell my international audience why that's so important.
The enlisted forces comprise, on an average, about 80% of any military. We have underinvested as a command on enlisted development for quite an amount of time. The initial response that I got from some of our people and our staff was, well, the Africans are not demanding enlisted development. When I had this forum last year, I found out the opposite. They're asking for it, but they're not getting it. So how do we get to professionally developing them? And that's when I came up with the idea of regionalizing. Let's go ahead and see what we can do. Small targeted investments that will give us immediate results or tangible results to show that, hey, we're making progress in Africa.
Ghana is one of the countries that you are focusing on with your program. They've been in an area that's been seeing an increase in piracy. How can the United States direct more resources, and why is it such an important problem to stem?
Well, when you look at counter-piracy efforts in the continent, the U.S. has been pretty silent in the last few years, because we have helped quite a bit for them to be able to create their forces. They have gotten equipment, training that helps them train for such contingencies. Do
you think we'll see something similar to how the United States helped with the Somali coast happening over on the Gulf of Guinea?
That can potentially happen, yes. But again, everything has to be at the request of the host government. And right now, we don't have a demand.
Can you tell me a little bit about the Chinese influence? Have you seen any military inroads on the continent between the Chinese and African counterparts?
The Chinese are in Africa. It's no secret. They have an extensive presence. They're building schools, stadiums, roads, railways, and they also have a limited military presence, and in some cases they're training African militaries. But the one thing that I will say is that there's not a single African in that room right now, all 51 of them, that will tell you that they have the same relationship that they have with me, with any Chinese non-commissioned officer. It is non-existent, and that's the relationship power that we have with our partners.
Well, that was VOA Pentagon Correspondent Carla Babb speaking with Chief Master Sergeant Ramón Colón-López of Africom.